Hello. Oh no.
Hello. Since I have those buttons over my camera, it's so
It's
great.
great to see you in a good mood. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing? So, hello everyone. Nice to see you all together again. Quite a lot of people today. Very cool.
Very cool.
And I had a lot of feedback already about this topic. Culture first is actually my
Hmm.
favorite topic, I have to say, because culture is somewhat foundational, and not only to software development, actually everywhere in this case, but culture is very foundational. And if the culture is not working, then I would say the rest is not working as well. So it is basically always aligned to each other, and I basically
How
can
do
see
you,
that everywhere. Yeah,
if things aren't working well, how do you know that it's caused by culture?
you will basically find that out in the first session when you talk with someone, right? Just a conversation about what's going on, and people then say, "Hey, let's say I have a problem with Kubernetes. I have a problem with the front end team. Front end team is not doing
Who
well,
doesn't
or
have problems with Kubernetes? Let's be honest.
well, me." I don't have because I
Because
don't only use it
you're
in an
not using it.
abstraction, so I don't have problems with it. Pass, it's great. No,
So what's the context? So you've been so you're running fellowships. Let's do
yeah.
the pitch first.
This
Let's do
is
the
where
pitch
with
first.
the ring, it is like you have this ring, and then you do something with the ring on the fellowships. The
Thank you for
fellowship
that.
of no, it's actually not this fellowship. This is another one. So helping fellowships, so not happy fellowships. We started fellowships to help with the culture in the first place, in the very first
Hmm.
place, and
Hmm.
fellowships were basically short before. Not actually not. They were quite a while then, but it was like small companies ask us how we are actually managed as a small company to keep up with modern web development, with modern cloud development. And this is actually not very easy because when you see, especially traditional small companies, you see this sometimes quite, let's say, older approaches, older technologies, a lot of legacy systems, and everyone does have a rough idea what a company could do or a team could do to actually move forward, but no one is doing that. And
Hmm.
I think this is what I refer to culture, because culture, of course, you always have a culture, but it depends how you nurture that culture, how you provide the right ground to grow the yeah, exactly. So it is actually like that. This is how you manage to have a good culture in the end. And culture is what actually happens, let's say, between or inside the people. So it is about mindsets. It's about the willingness to do something. It's about motivation. It's about the opposite of resistance. I'm talking a lot about resistance. Those things are adding up to what we call culture. So it is the summation of the people who are working in a company or teams, or teams in summation are cultures again of the company. So it is all about the relationship between humans, and those can motivate us, and those can demotivate us. They can even become toxic. This is then the toxic environment, or I like to call it toxic culture, because it's actually more precise than toxic environment. Toxic environment could be you have too much chlorine in the air in your office, but this is a toxic environment then for humans. But it is not what I mean. It's about when we see what we say toxic culture or beneficial culture, an open-minded culture. There are so many, let's say, prefixes for culture.
And how do
Um,
you, so on the topic of toxicity, or
yeah.
if we're bringing in things like unfair incentives, lack of psychological safety, I don't know, um, lack of clarity and lack of boundaries. Okay, how do you separate out all of these possible issues, all of these possible root causes for a toxic culture or a sort of unproductive culture? How do you separate all of this from just particularly engineering culture being root cause? They are connected, obviously, but if you had
Yeah, yeah,
to,
yeah.
If
it
you
is
had to
about the
start
willingness.
code,
I would say to make it easy, because it can be very complex. So it
yes,
is, especially
absolutely.
when you have complex people and you're not two people in the company but 200 people.
Yeah.
It can be very complex. But in reality, so when it all comes down to the willingness to do things. So it is about, do you have a team which wants to move forward, or do you have a team where you actually need to get to the point somehow in the future to actually start to move forward? And if you for example, and move forward in this case is move forward to a better engineering culture, to better engineering practices, or actually engineering, getting away from the craft, to
I
engineering.
like that you're mentioning that, right? So we're now entering the domain of, you know, one of the hallmark ways to, let's say, test for engineering culture is a organization or a department that is just stuck with technical debt, tech debt, technological debt. Ward Cunningham, who has coined this term, he has brought the financial metaphor into the technology space in the early 2000s. And we didn't used to call it tech debt up until then, which is very, since the beginning of my career, I knew what tech debt was, and I kept using it. But I didn't know that as an industry, we only started using this meme 20 years ago, which is about when I started working professionally, coding professionally. So Ward Cunningham recently posted a video, or somebody in my LinkedIn network posted a video about him from 10 years ago, which is sort of like halfway between the start of the metaphor and now, about this idea that tech debt is about us not knowing right now what the best approach is to something, or not knowing
Yeah.
what the correct feature is, or what the correct order of things to do right now, what the best architecture is right now, right? Kevin Henney mentions a lot
Yeah.
that you have to experiment to get your architecture right. You can't just get it right by thinking about it. So technical debt is when you manage your risk by saying, yes, I know that I don't understand everything, but I'm taking on risk to verify what happens next. And then you need to manage that technical debt. You always need to pay it off. And why did he make this video? Well, he made this video to highlight that badly written code, negligent code, like unprofessionally crafted code, that is not technical debt. Negligence is negligence. Unprofessional conduct is unprofessional conduct. It's not technical debt, right? It's not something, a risk that you've managed and took on, and now you need to rewrite it. No, the risk was that you didn't know what you were doing, but also your engineers also didn't know how to code it, and those are two separate problems. I think that's a good example of bad engineering culture, where you have a managed debt, but also the culture was not right. So the culture said, okay, if we're taking on debt and we're not sure what we're doing, then we also don't need to build it very well, which I see a lot with MVPs, startups building prototypes, right? Where there's this idea that, well, if we're just building something to throw it away, let's build it badly. Which is, which is the equivalent of, yeah, I want to rent a car for 3 years, please. Oh, 3 years only. Okay, here's a shit one, right? It's this idea that if it's a shorter time horizon on the code, that
actually it is vice versa.
Really
if you buy a car for only or rent a car for only 3 years, you want to have a great one because it's only for 3 years and stuff like this. But you are right, in software development it's a little bit short-sighted. And yes, this is of course all connected to culture, because a culture is, let's say, you have many facets. So maybe we talk a little bit about what actually culture is, because now we going to a little bit of a peak now. So I think most people are there now. I hope you get coffee, especially in America. It's early in the morning. So good morning there, good evening in other parts of the world. Culture. So we always have cultures. Cultures is the relationship between people. And the result of the culture is what we actually do. Because we have a purpose in our company. We have, as mainly software developers, we have purpose. We need to create something. We need to be creative in order to create a product, which then serves other people to create their business. This is what most of us are doing. There are some exceptions like scientific approaches, but let's stick to the very basic approach of we create a product on some point. And in order to create a product successfully, we should all in a company focus on that goal. So we have cultures on this planet, like for example the Japanese culture or some older European cultures, which were like by definition, or let's say you grow up in the sense of you need to participate to a higher good, to a higher product. You need to dedicate yourself. But in software development companies, we often have the problem that not everyone is really dedicated to the similar goal. So people are oftentimes not dedicated to the goals. This is what I call the disconnect between business and development, where the development people are working towards tickets, but not toward a outcome. Right? So people don't really know why they are there. And if you don't know why, you don't have a higher purpose you move towards to. You spend your energy. You need to become better in order to be, to contribute on a better level to that one. So this is actually where you need to measure yourself. But you can't if everything you do is measured by how is the velocity of tickets, but you don't know why. And this is, for example, just a simple example. And the culture is what defines in a team, not defines, but what is the foundation for the team to stand up together and say, this is our common goal. So for example, we have right now a fellowship client where we help, and this is somewhat nice to see. This is the very first time that everyone in the team is aligned by default to that goal. So I never saw that before, that no one needs to be convinced of something. They just ask, hey, how can we do that? We want to do that all together, right? And so I never saw that. This is a very, very positive culture. This is great. Right?
We have some comments in chat, but you mentioned, your coaching business, your fellowships. What's a fellowship and who is it for specifically? Because you were at a meetup, right? You were at one of your fellowship clients invited you to a meetup, and that's sort of why we didn't stream last week on Wednesday. And now I saw how excited you were describing to me how amazing Wednesday was. So I said, okay, let's do this on stream. So now I'm curious, what was Wednesday like? What was the meetup like? And
the exciting part was a QA session, which was twice as long as the actual presentation, which was of an hour, and it was continue on the balcony later on, where we had so many topics, which it was interesting to see how interested people are in culture first approach.
Was this the first time that you connected in person with a fellowship client like this, with a meetup talk?
Fellowship, with fellowship, yes, but I was on many meetups, or let's say smaller conferences, more as a guest or speaker, just invited because they saw me somewhere else on the CloudFest and they invited me there, and this is something different, but this was very personal. And
so the audience were all from the same company.
No, sorry, it wasn't. There were several companies. It was around, I don't know exactly, it's something between 40 to 50 people, I think. Different companies, mostly mid to senior level people. I would say mostly engineers or CTO, CEO, something like that. But nearly all of them technical background. And that was kind of interesting.
Small, medium business CTO, right? Not
So typical agencies actually, working for larger clients, having their solution in place. So actually great people. Awesome. Nice to speak with them. And it is a little bit about this is an exact topic. So people love to listen to the cultural topic. Why? Of course, because it affects everyone, right? We can talk about TDD, it doesn't affect everyone. We can talk about Tailwind, doesn't affect everyone. We can talk about Kubernetes, it doesn't affect most of us. It actually is some side topics still when you take the look at the larger picture, WordPress and stuff like that. And but culture is everywhere. Even if you are a one-person company, you still have a culture, and it is a little bit like that. And
That's true.
you see
That's
that
true.
this is what I see is that people actually know what is good, that they need to change something. You
Hmm.
understand that when you see a lot of legacy code, the developer experience is going down, the user experience is going down accordingly. There are many problems. You still can go on, but you need to do more and more heroics. You try to find ways to just get things done. And this is
Hmm.
where people struggle. So, for example, you are 10 years in some specific area and you know deeply in yourself you need to change something, but you don't know exactly how, but you
Hmm.
have the urge and the feeling. But especially when it's the problematic part is where you have teams or companies where only one or two people have this feeling, but everyone else is actually happy with
Yeah.
the current status quo. But a status quo is actually not good. Maybe it's bad for the outcome. Maybe it is stagnation, or even the company is slowly but steady falling down. And this is where we need to take a look at the cultural aspect. So
Hmm.
how can we, for example, top down or bottom up, do something for that? So
Hmm.
culture is nothing the boss is doing, or let's say the junior is doing. This is what everyone is affecting. So it is, of course, there are, let's say, the more silent people are less effectful on that one, and the more strong people, let's say the dominant. So I've written about the dominant culture, which was actually the first part of the presentation. The dominant person, those are the persons who need to be very careful what they do, because they can be awesome drivers for a change, but they can be the most dire resistant people. So they can basically hold everything back, right, at the same time. So being someone very strong, very opinionated and biased at the same time can be
Hmm.
very dangerous and lead to extremely toxic culture where nothing where you become a bottleneck, some kind of gateway. So there is basically nothing going without you, and this is then a very negative culture. But if you have a culture where the strong people motivate the others, that the others start to move and walk towards the higher goal, start to understand the higher goal, start to
Hmm.
understand, hey, we can do something with something we haven't done something beforehand because it was disconnected from us. Now it is connected, so we can participate, we can develop ownership, and with that ownership we need to develop maturity in order to take the responsibility. Those are no
We have
buzzwords, right?
we have some questions in chat, and I'm noticing your video quality has deteriorated significantly. I just checked on the public stream as well. Could you try rejoining the stream real quick, the studio,
With the red
and
button.
and don't hit the red button. Yeah. Maybe if it's
I don't
um,
know. Wait a second. I can try if I good 5G. I could think of
we just had
switching.
a we just had a round number hour as well, so
Can
it's
we have
possible.
from the audience a little feedback? Is my video quality really that bad? Because I see by myself well, and I don't have connection problems there. Yeah,
Let's just double
I
check
should
real
look.
quick. In the meantime, some questions. I think that's one of our regulars.
Okay, let's go
Let's
through the
see.
questions though. Yeah. Pixelated,
Uh,
not bad.
Actually, not one of our regulars. Francois asks, how do you deal with toxic middle management when upper management is unresponsive to feedback? So not this client that you just spoke to, right? So there is disagreement in whether there's something that needs to be fixed.
First of all, it is not something which you fix from outside. This is something you can only fix from inside. So it is, as sometimes. So I talked about those dominant persons, and when you have a problem with the middle management, it's either that this middle management doesn't do anything at all. This could be one thing, but it's more
Hmm.
likely that it's doing things which it shouldn't do, or is too dominant in doing the wrong things. A little bit of Dunning Kruger, maybe those kind of things. You can, if you pull someone in from outside, Normally those people, or like me, let's say I'm very opinionated but not so biased, which means I can challenge people to think about things, and I know that in the moment I am there, people do that. But as soon as I leave, people revert and go back to the old state. This is because we as humans can't change that fast. It does take time in order to
It takes a
process
lot of
those
time.
things. Exactly. At
It
least
usually
some.
and it's surprising. Like it's somewhere between it's usually between 90 days to it's usually between 3 to 9 months that whatever you started working on today, that 3 to 9 months is the sort of earliest chance that it has to become permanent, so it becomes permanent behavior and not just something you're actively working on. So it actually instills that means that only the thing I'm starting working on today, if it takes us 6 months into an engagement to just start unraveling topics, it's 3 to 9 months from that point that those changes become seeped in. I have coaching clients that I stopped working with, a few years ago, and it's only now that certain lessons are just hitting home, coming in from the past and saying, oh, okay, so now that we stopped doing this, I realized what the difference was when we had the coaching calls and we didn't have the coaching calls, and what it was exactly you were trying to say. And sort of now I have enough data to actually get the whole picture. And now I'm sort of slowly starting. And I have a lot of previous clients coming back and basically highlighting this, is that, the real work essentially started when we stopped coaching. In a way, right? Because then
I pulled the plug. I pulled the plug and switched to Wi-Fi. 1 second.
Okay. Just tell me you didn't pull the plug before you left the studio. Okay, he's gone now. Since there were a lot of jokes on.
I'm back.
No. Oh, that was too quick. Because we had a lot of jokes. We had a lot of jokes earlier on. Oh, no. Wait.
But you have. What?
We had a lot of jokes earlier on the on Lord of the Rings and Fellowships. I remember there's a thumbnail. There's a Sauron thumbnail of you that we created.
You made that one. I remember. No, we never you created that as a joke.
I created that one. No, because you had like a catchy title, like one strategy to rule them all or something, and I substituted the thumbnail.
Okay, but you actually back to the question. So the middle management. So you can first of all only do that from inside. So which means that it is a little bit like you need to start to convince the people. It is extremely important that you get somehow the middle management to start to understand their doing and the consequence of that, right? And it is actually about that. So it is not about that you can force people to do that. So it's like of course the upper management could force this person to do something. This doesn't lead to a better culture. This does lead to a negative motivation, which is enforced motivation. This is the very same as discipline. This does work for some days and then the discipline is gone. This is the very same. So you need to get the people to have intrinsic. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm noticing you and I have a little delay. Your quality is still bad, and we started getting a little bit of network jitter.
Germany is a third world country when it comes to internet connections. Still, I don't.
No, the internet is good. It's just super expensive. So, I mean, compared to the US, it's still cheap. So we Europeans have it really, really well, as long as you don't live on a farm. So we were talking about sort of the middle management area. So there's a separation between. Basically, there's misaligned interests in the leadership camps, and there might be a separation of engineering as a cost center and product or business outcomes are being planned in isolation. It's very good now, by the way. Your video quality went back up, so this is now.
Yeah, I plugged in the cable again, so I don't know. It was one of those days.
I mean, you have the hearts and the celebration thingies, the confetti, but
Yes.
but good video quality is sometimes a luxury. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe that's
Maybe.
for our listeners who are not getting the jokes that we're laughing at. Adrian has the new M1, M2
Very
um,
new. Yeah.
laptop, or yeah, is a studio? It's
What?
a
No,
laptop, right?
I have an M1 Pro. Yeah.
M1 Pro, and he's playing around with the on
Yeah.
CPU video
Yeah.
editing
People
of the
showed me that
balloons and the
functionality.
hearts.
It is actually working now as well. Now you see, it's great, right?
Oh, the
So
amount
awesome.
of times
So, but
I
let's
have
get
that
back to
happen in
topic.
Zoom
Let's
calls.
let's
So
get back to topic.
there is a question that relates to this, that is from the very beginning.
Okay.
So Raul asks, Adrian, do you think it is a situation where top-down decision making does make sense, right? So should the culture problem be solved
Yeah.
by
So
being
first of all,
mandated top-down?
what is very important to understand, as I said in the beginning, so the cultural aspects, are the foundation to move forward. But you need to give reason to do so, which means who's giving the reason? It is actually in a let's say organization of 20 people. It is not the new coming junior. If the new coming junior developer is doing this, you have a severe cultural problem, because you need as a company to have a good reason to go forward. That at least most people need to push towards that, right? So. And the only persons who are actually steering the wheel here is, let's say, the top of the pyramid. This is like that. This is the typical thing in companies. And that's okay, actually. You only need to do that right in a good way, and not in a toxic way, and not in a bossy way, but in, let's say, the typical thing like, hey, we are, let's say, primus inter pares, for example, the first among the same. I don't know the translation, but you know what I mean. The first among equal, I think, and exactly. So yes, it is. So if you want to change something, if you want to invoke a positive culture, you need to give reason, and the reasoning is not to tell people what they have to do, but to convince people of a goal to work towards. For example, switch from a service-oriented agency to a product as a service company, to make that transition. There are so many
That's my
promises.
favorite kind of pass.
That's actually great, and this is a challenge, and you can only do that as a team. This is nothing one can do alone. So you, as a top level management, you need to give vision. You need to give reason to start to move that journey. So I call it a journey, and you have a fellowship going that journey, and this is actually the fellowship. What we were talking about is just the role model for this group. So the team itself, the teams themselves, they need to be those fellowships. They need to go this journey and walk that path. And sometimes it's steep, and sometimes it's easy to go, but you need to go and all together. So I don't know who of you hike out there in the audience. So I used to do through hikes when I was fit years ago. I'm not so fit anymore, to be honest, but I was doing those. Then every time you do that in a group, you can only travel as fast as the slowest person in the group is doing. And if you have hard to travel terrain, you need to make sure that everyone is skilled enough not to break legs, and not to pack the backpacks wrong, and suddenly, like I did, I made a mistake in my very early days, but this is another topic right now. And you can mess it up, so you can hold the team back, and you can complain about, that's actually what I want to do. I want to go home. I want to do something different. While most majority wants to go forward because there's the goal. And this is what we need to learn. So we need to reason to go that route, to go to the other side, and then beyond that. And this is what you need to infuse down to the bottom line. This is your job at top level. It is not to make the decision. You need to go there or you're fired, right? This is not what I mean. This is actually the quite opposite. You shouldn't do this, because this brings the people to the point where they start to look for another workplace. This is what happens then. Good. Show don't tell. Right. Exactly. So as soon as it gets to people's topics, we are in the opposite. It is basically show don't tell. Right.
Mhm.
Okay. So we have another one, Raul. How should we proceed if overboard
Overboard.
is not willing to change, enhance their management ways? Yeah. So if the top management doesn't want to change anything, this is one of those major roadblocks. So you
Yeah.
can do a lot if in the let's say in the individual area of the contributors there that you can do a lot there. You can do a lot in the middle management. It's very hard in the top. So if the top
Mhm.
is willingly against the idea to change something, there is less there's not much you can do. In reality, it is like there are limitations. You can't. I would tell you stories if I would tell you you can't change every company. You cannot. There are
Yeah.
companies where we actually failed to do something. We failed because it never happens to that we
And
basically we were not going to that journey. We were never starting because there were so many reasons in a workshop, in the first workshop, found
absolutely.
why we
Yeah.
shouldn't do this, while this company had severe problems, but
Mhm.
still no need to change because problems are bad, but as soon as it comes to changes, it's worse. So
Mhm.
when you have this situation, you can try, but on some point you waste your energy. On
Mhm.
some point, it is like that you if you are suffering because of that,
Mhm.
you should switch. This
So
is what I
that's
can
that's
tell
a
you.
very good
Yeah.
point because not all companies, not all teams are coachable.
Yeah.
Um, and this is an interesting topic. So I did open up a poll, and by far the highest vote was people want to hear more about coaching and engineering culture. So just as a temperature check in chat, like how many times were you coached or had a coach on board with your team, with your organization, in your career? Zeros are also fine. I'm very much interested in zero. Um, but it's great if your number is one, two, three,
You
four,
mean the
five. So
audience right now?
the audience, yeah, like how many put a zero in chat or a one in chat if it depending on how many times you had a coach or worked with a coach. Agile coaches kind of count. April mentioned zero. Okay. Uh, just curious, like what your experience is, because I think a lot of we are looking at this from the lens of business owners, but it might be interesting to actually discuss it from our perspective as the coach, and as you as a mentor. So, you know, what people might not know is that we have intro calls with our prospective clients, and the purpose of those calls is not, well, among other things, is to figure out how to charge you, what the outcomes will be, why the timing, what the right cadence, what the right structure is. But most importantly, can I even help you? Right? To give a little bit of a test run to see, are you coachable? Is there anything I can do here at all to make a positive influence? If I can make a positive influence, is it worth the amount of effort it will require to make change in your organizations? It seems it's mostly zeros in chat. That there's an Adrian person who said 4. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I had
April has a
coaches.
question. Same. I think I went through like 12 coaches in my career for
Mhm.
various different capacities. Very interesting from everything: relationship, um, fitness, health,
Okay,
technology,
I haven't
testing,
counted those. I
business.
just in the software development space
I
um,
mean,
for several
it wasn't
areas,
it
but
wasn't paid for by the company always, but I always saw that when I took my personal development goals seriously, it always had a positive effect on my career. Right. So
yeah, of
regardless of
course,
what it
because you
was,
start to think
if I
about things. You need to have someone who challenges you. If you
yeah.
ask, and this is for a culture transition, it's actually the same. So in my last video, I actually said one specific and very important thing: you need to have an opinion, but you should not be biased. There's the
Mhm.
differences. They're not the same things.
Yeah.
So if you go into a room, I repeat that. If you go into a room, right? And this is not a bad example. You go into a room with an opinion, you are a strong character, and you force everyone to follow your opinion. You go out, nothing has
Mhm.
changed. People are unwilling to follow you because it's actually like, yeah, okay.
So
But if you go
biased.
into a room, sorry, if you go into a room,
Mhm.
yeah, and you are opinionated and you are open-minded at the same time and not biased, and other people coming into a room as well doing the very same, you go out with that opinion which won in the end, which was accepted by everyone. And this is where you actually grow. And when you have that, you have basically a positive culture. Those companies who doing that, they are moving forward, let's say by default. This is
Mhm.
intrinsic motivation. There is no management necessary to actually push them forward. There is no. And this is
It's
great.
actually the adversarial the situations, the challenges that help you grow. April had a question like bringing on a coach with the team, right? So particularly the question is about, were you working with a team that was coached, where there was somebody in a coaching capacity? It doesn't matter whether it's team related. It might be an executive coach. He might not even be directly involved with the coach. Maybe there's just a coach on the company somewhere, and you just don't know about them. Because people like to think that, oh, my manager is my coach, and good ones are. And oftentimes there are organizations where people are misguided in thinking that HR is their coach. That if there's any issues in culture, engineering culture, that HR is the place to go to. And that is not the case. HR is
No.
usually the place to go to get documentation so the company doesn't get sued.
Yeah, this
it's
is.
not about improving and challenging people on
When I
to
grew
grow.
up, there were some kind of instances in the company as a young
Mhm.
person where you can go to and complain. No one did that because you always
No
were
one did
afraid of the consequences
that.
of doing
Yes, yeah.
so, right? Especially not about the top management, right? The next thing you face is actually getting laid off, and this is what you don't do and
Yeah.
what you shouldn't do. And it's such an instance, right? Having where you can bring on your complaints is a sign that you have severe problems in your culture,
Mhm.
and it
It's a
is about
psychological
it.
safety issue, right? So
Yeah,
there
but
is a
why?
blaming
So people ask for that. If
culture.
people ask for something like that, and there were maybe
No, but
maybe then there is
so the
something
problem
wrong.
so the problem isn't that negative feedback or maybe disagreement can be voiced. The problem is related to what happens after it has been voiced, right? So if I tell you there's a problem, if you react negatively at the messenger, then you're creating a culture of low psychological safety. Because if you're shooting down, if you're not if you're doing it deliberately, but if you accidentally, unintentionally show negative emotion when bad news gets to you, that immediately creates a
It,
culture. It incentivizes a culture that has low
yeah,
psychological safety, and psych, organizations that are low in psychological safety are very good at faking everything's okay, right? So organizations that self-report how they're doing are notoriously misunderstanding how bad things really are if
yeah.
psychological
This is
safety is low, right?
especially when you have something like
So on the
political correctness
metrics,
in there as well,
exactly,
and
exactly.
it
So
is basically
all of the
artificially
enforced
covered up.
political correctness, diversity and inclusion, um, political. So any kind of political speech that requires you to sort of carefully weigh your words regarding um, socio-technical, or socio-political influences within the company. That all creates this metric of numbers-wise, everything looks okay, but then there are all these issues that nobody's talking about because talking about them is stigmatized, right? So that's how. But it happens unintentionally. It happens because somebody is not careful enough
Yeah.
when being given bad news, and they allow themselves to immediately react to it, right? And even
But we
especially
need to
senior
differentiate
managers.
here. It is about you don't create a great culture if you just tackle the problems. Tackling the
Hmm.
problems is like paying down a debt you already created. This is not really
Yeah.
changing the behavior to not create new debt. And this is a little bit the same with a culture. So nurturing a culture doesn't mean to tackle the current problems. It does mean to
Hmm.
prepare something that the culture can become better over time, which doesn't mean
Hmm.
which does mean you need to care about problems, because otherwise you don't understand what's going wrong and on.
Hmm.
But you need to, in the same moment, in order to change something, you need to. It's my anecdote to the garden, right? You need to
Hmm.
make sure that the garden is prepared for good growth. That everything is set up right. This is what you can do. The higher you are in the hierarchy, and the lower you
Hmm.
are in the hierarchy, is to try to align yourself better with that one. Which means, let's take a look at the bottom line, right? It is a little bit like the individual contributors. What can they do, right? First of all, before you start to complain about a team manager, something like that, think of yourself. If you have done everything you could, right, in order to grow, get better, and contribute to the system.
Hmm.
So just for a psychological little challenge right now, if you have a team of 5 persons and everyone in this person is just dedicated to the goal of the team, you actually don't
Hmm.
need a team lead. You don't need someone who tells what to do, because
Hmm.
everyone is already pushing towards that. This is what you sometimes see in, let's say, in very old teams where you have a flag hierarchy, where people do that for so many years. It's totally clear that everyone is working towards the goal. This is actually quite rare, but it is existing. And what we need to learn about that is, you need to always make sure that you get your done or your stuff right before you actually complain about others, because oftentimes our own complacency we have is just an expression of resistance. So even if, let's say, the team lead would be a person, would change, then we would find another reason to complain, because in reality we don't want to change as well.
So
So it is easier to point
it's
my finger
also,
at the team lead in this moment.
let's reconnect the dots a little bit. So most of our audience has mentioned zero, right? So they've never been coached before. April mentions, you see that at high performing firms or television series, but I have not seen it at a startup. And this happens a lot, actually. I don't know which, I think it was the Healthy Developer newsletter. One of the publications recently posted on Substack recently posted this idea of complaint to praise ratio in startups. And usually the sort of less trained leadership, right? So leadership is where in organizations, small to medium businesses, where leadership is a function of longevity, right? So the person longest at the company has the more senior positions. It is often the case that they have not been trained to be at that position, right? So this isn't somebody who is a seventh time CEO. This is a first time CEO, and they just happen to be at the company the longest. Um, Usually, they are not trained to be at that position. Especially if they don't have coaching, if they don't have mentoring, if they've never done this at a different business before, um, then they don't know what a healthy environment looks like. Which means that it's very easy to get these things right. And April also mentions, right, what is the reaction of the manager? The body language is key, right? So
Yeah.
if you have no idea what um, the right culture looks like, then you have no positive vision, and all you can do is look at the problems. And if all you do is look at the problems and you don't have a positive sort of North Star to aim towards
Yeah.
culturally, then there's no praise, there's no positive reinforcement, there's no celebration, no reward, and there's a ton of complaining, right? And
Yeah,
then
if you focus
everybody
on the
plays this
problems, you
game,
see the problems everywhere.
and everybody's problem hunting, and everybody's having like inclusion or conflict resolution meetings about what are we allowed to complain about, what is it productive to complain about, right? So even the the stimulus of solving the the actual elephant in the room is also only constrained to the negative side, right? So to just the negative side of the symptoms of the bigger picture that lacks a clear vision of what is our culture. Because it's easy to say, here are our values, like
Yeah.
grit, and
We all need to
we work
define our
hard,
values, and then you
and
have this booklet where all the values are written down,
honesty,
and no one
and
of
I
the
don't
employees
know,
know this booklet.
and
Great.
inclusion, and you just put a few words on your wall, and that's bullshit. That's not your culture. Culture is what
Culture.
happens.
What is the living
Culture
version
is
of
what
it?
happens. Culture is what happens when somebody's kid gets sick and they don't call in on a very important launch day, and they happen to prioritize their kid over your business, and then that kicks off a whole bunch of problems. And what you do in that situation, that's culture. Not what, who's complaining about this and whose problem is this and how many different meetings is this going to be mentioned on that this was a fuck up, right? So it's not about this aspect of, I really liked how you highlighted it, right? So it's about having the positive North Star. Come with an opinion, but don't be biased. Don't be biased towards your own opinion, right? So be open to have your mind change. Be open to challenge. If your idea is good, be open for it to be challenged. Because if the idea is good,
Your opinion
then
is just a
people will
hypothesis,
exactly.
nothing more. It's not proof.
So
You think it's
Safia,
right, proof it's right, right?
Sophia asked, what does a healthy / non-toxic culture look like? Great question. What should we be aiming for that's realistic in companies you've seen?
So a positive culture is where you actually have a vision and an overarching goal. If you don't have that, you will see silos and smaller groups who set themselves questionable goals, like how can we manage to get the work done quick so we can get home and play some computer games. This is, for example, an unmanaged culture which works mediocre down to bad, something like that, but actually not really good, because no one is really aiming for the higher goal, and it is all about the higher goal. So if you have reason to follow someone, and so in the hierarchy is about, let's say, why have we followed, or why are we actually existing as humans still, right? So why is it not another species who was? So we were actually there were people who had good ideas who were worth following. Those were, the leader types, the chieftains, or something like that, or people who had strong ideas and walked forward. And this is still the same today. So we need to have people in the company who say, I can imagine us as a company in 3 years here and there. Not exactly, but roughly. And I'm a charismatic person with a lot of empathy. And I will make sure that everyone down to the bottom of the hierarchy is seeing that and is infused by this let's say euphoric feelings that we need to walk towards that. And this is in fact the very basis of that culture, which means that you go to work and you are infused by that one. If you just go to the work to do your job and you don't care about that, then you have a bad culture, because you just do your own thing. This is isolation and stagnation. And this is actually a simple explanation without going into software development and engineering right now. So when we go into software engineering and see the problems there, those are then symptoms of that. But in reality, it's about how can you align everyone in the company to walk the same route? Have you ever tried to make a through hike with 30 people, and don't give a map and don't give a reason, just say, just walk.
And one
You come
person
1
has
hour
way
later,
too
just
much,
walk.
and one person has way too much Fanta in their backpack.
Who told you that? I had that. Well, that was another thing. But this is another culture that was just stupid of me. That was just stupid. In glass bottles, right?
To give Sophia some more context, a good example is healthy culture. So let's separate out, let's say, productive culture from healthy culture. And I think that's where this topic of psychological safety ties in with engineering, right? So a good engineering culture is a productive one. But it's possible for the business to perform badly and for the culture to still be healthy, right? Because often what you see, especially in startups where there's a lot of chaos and a lot of risk, right? What can happen is if the company is doing well, culture is good. If the company is doing badly financially, culture goes to shit, right? And then that just makes the problem worse, right? So it's really important that you separate out whatever is happening in the real world from what you actually expect from your culture, right? So it has to be defined, and your culture has to make sense even in bad times. That's the most important aspect. And I can give you an example. Oftentimes, even this week, I'm working with 3 leaders right now, coaching actively. I met all of them this week, and the most overarching aspect is that software businesses in general, but senior management, leadership, is primarily a truth-seeking activity. Right? So untrained leaders are usually in this space of, okay, the goals are chaotic. I'm not sure we can do it, but I have an idea. Am I right? Right? So they're looking at this from that bias lens of, I have an idea. Am I right? Rather than doing a truth-seeking exercise, which is, I think this works. Is that true? Right? What is the best way to solve this problem? What does best mean? Right? So does this solve the problem sufficiently? Does this solve the problem sufficiently? Am I
Yeah,
measuring it
feedback
fairly?
driven.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's data-driven, feedback-driven. So good leadership, good culture is basically following the scientific method, right? So was this a good idea? Can the fact this was a good idea be independently verified, right? So can somebody else look at what I did and say, yeah, this was actually a good idea? The data says, the data supports, I see, this is why you did it. These were your constraints. These were your different options that you had, and I think you chose the best one. The outcome weren't, the outcome didn't meet expectations, but you did the best given given the cards that you were dealt. You made the best decision, right? So this was the best decision you could have done. That is a fair
Or you learned
culture.
that you have made a wrong decision. That is feedback as well. So
Yes,
it is
yes. So
important that you accept that it's a good. So Brian Finster was. I remember how he said. I was running the clip so many times in the after show. So he said that you have a hypothesis and you bring
yeah,
a proof, and you need to be you need to accept when it's actually not or basically was a fail, but you need to be euphoric and happy
yeah.
when it is. So it is a little bit like that, and I really like that one. It is important to understand that this is being open-minded. This is actually it, which means that you have your opinion, you need to prove it. You can do it by challenging with others, other opinions, by just challenging yourself. But it's very important that you don't stick with the opinion you have right now for the next years to come, because the opinion is, let's say, even if it's correct now, it doesn't mean that it's correct in 2 years. And you need to challenge this constantly. This is why we have so many, let's say, terminologies with continuous as a prefix. So continuous learning, continuous improvement, continuous enhancement, continuous learning. There are so many. The idea behind is always the same. Everything is changing. Yeah? This is how Breaking Bad, the series, began. It's all about change, and the very same thing is in the software development space. It's all about change. How can we as a team change together? This is then a cultural aspect again. So do we work together? Do we all have mindsets which are compatible with each other or not?
I've been referencing. So we're reading Release It right now in the book club. Really old book. Release It with an exclamation mark, second edition, by Michael Nygard, who you might know from Architecture Decision Records. He created the tool that helps you do architecture decision records. Anyway, unrelated. In the book Release It, there's this idea that underpinning all of the patterns, all of the craftsmanship, all of the things you can do, it's basically about having a hypothesis and basically trying to truth seek and proving that your system is resilient. So I've been referencing the Stacy matrix for this very reason. For those of you who don't know, the Stacy matrix is the one. The Stacy matrix is the one that has the what and the how on two different axes, and then bottom left is simple, and then you have
We have a
complicated
visual
and
stream. You
complex
can just
and
show it.
chaotic. Well, so my point is, there's this idea of waterfall and agile, which are in different corners of the Stacy matrix. Waterfall is in the predictive corner, agile is in the adaptive corner. What does that mean? That means that in the predictive corner, you can tell if something is a good idea just by thinking about it, right? So I can crunch the numbers, I can put the plan in a Gantt chart, I can put it in an Excel spreadsheet, and depending on what the numbers end up being, just by virtue of one person focused, deep work, going in and understanding the numbers, they can, before we take any action, they can say this is a good idea, this is a bad idea, right? So truth seeking happens through analysis. For example, you might have a mortgage. You might say, okay, what are your numbers? Okay, given your numbers, this is a good idea, and then you buy the mortgage. Whereas the adaptive system, it is not possible to verify that something is a good idea or not by analysis. You have to try it, and then depending on what the data tells you, then in sort of retroactively, you then have to connect the dots and say, okay, that was a bad idea. Now I've now received data that decision I made 2 weeks ago was a bad one, right? And that has a certain
2 weeks ago is a good point, because you shouldn't wait for too long. If you make decisions and you have a five people team, and you are too late with that one, with the realization, and you realize it when everyone in the team actually left the company, and then you come to the conclusion that it was actually a bad decision, it's actually too late. And you need to be early on in small steps. Don't try to understand or prove the master plan for the next 3 years. Prove the next steps. It's the very same in the agile development. Do something, get the feedback.
The example that we mentioned yesterday on the book club call was, if you have a mortgage, you can do it predictive or adaptive. You can say, well, I can just buy it and then start paying it, and if there's problems, I'll sell it in 6 months. Now, we know that that's a predictive problem. It is possible to calculate it. So if it is possible to predict, it's silly to choose an adaptive strategy, right? Because you could have just done the math. And the inverse is also true. If the problem is adaptive, it's silly to overthink it. April has to go. Thank you, April.
Bye. See you next time.
Thank you for sharing your morning coffee with us. Right. So if the problem is adaptive, it is silly to not do anything and just be stuck analyzing the problem. If the problem is not predictive, there's no point analyzing it, which is the whole no estimates movement, right? Because we can't. How long the project will take is an adaptive problem, and it's meaningless to analyze it to death. That's why waterfall doesn't work. Waterfall works really well for predictive problems. The weather is an adaptive problem, right? It's really hard to say. So, for example, my calendar is a predictive problem, right? I can tell you 2027 on a Sunday, on the first Sunday of May, I will be here, because it's on my calendar. It's very hard for me to say what the weather will be. It's an adaptive problem, right? So I can't just crunch the numbers and try to make it up. However, once I get close enough, I can tell you with 66% certainty that tomorrow will be the same weather as today, right? So given a very short time frame, the predictive and the adaptive models get really close. It's only on longer time horizons that you actually figure out that there are differences, right? So if you have a bad engineering culture, it's possible you are playing a predictive game. You're trying to analyze everything, and you're constantly looking in the future, and you're never looking in the past to figure out how many of your decisions actually didn't work out and why, right? And this is not the same thing as retrospectives. Retrospectives is us just potentially talking about what might have happened. That is not truth seeking. That is seeking everybody's sort of biased opinion that cannot be independently verified to figure out, do you think this was good or do you think this was bad?
It is
But
actually
truth
understanding the
is,
results of their own doing. This is actually what you do.
yes, but the problem with the problem with retrospectives, at least the way that I've seen them facilitated, is that they need to be personal, but blameless. It's not helpful for everybody to constantly voice their opinion about what they think strategically happened overall and whether it's a good thing or not, right? So people will say, well, what were you not happy with? And then it's just this, bah! Right? Because it's looking for problems. We shouldn't be looking for problems. We should be looking for the truth. And we should be primarily...
I'm guilty for that, actually. Yeah. I have the tendency to complain quite often, and I know that it's actually
It's
what
human.
you say.
We all do.
It is, yeah, exactly, and we need to fight that, because this is actually inner resistance, try to keep us away from what we should do in that moment. And resistance is great in that. It's such a relentless power which is actually trying to keep us back. Have I mentioned the Wolf Art today? But this is actually well described. I'm reading again right now the No One Wants to Read My Shit. This is a follow-up book. I don't know, the fourth or fifth or something like that. It's a great book as well. Read that 7 times, or listened to it actually. And in those books, it is very well written or described what actually holds us back from change in a positive way. And if we want to change, so we're always talking about change, right? But what brings us to the point that we want to make a change, and this is definitely not resistance. Resistance is the opposing force to that. So which means that resistance is trying to keep us away from not doing a change, no, actually from doing a change. So keep us where we are right now and stagnate, because everything is great, right? Just take a look at the next Netflix series or something like that, instead of doing a real change, which could be painful, and we are afraid of that. So if you're afraid of something, and this could be taking a look at the mistakes you have made in the past, learn from that, but then move forward, right? Instead of staying there and complaining about that, because you can stay there and complain and but it feels good to complain because you can say it was in the past, it's not right now. It is a little bit like it's just resistance. You need to move forward. And this is what I've just said beforehand with the culture as well. You need to make sure that you, instead of taking a look at the current problems, with the people, so 2 of your developers are constantly arguing each other and fighting each other. Try to help this or intervene there every day is not a form of improving your culture. You need to improve it on a different way. So you need to improve it way from bottom up and top down. But this is actually a problem in the middle part. This is a symptom. You can heal the symptom, you can ease the symptom, but you can't fix the culture with just easing the symptom.
Cause. Yeah, you need to address the root cause. So coming back to healthy culture, I mentioned shortly that separation between healthy culture and productive culture. So what we're talking about now is healthy culture. This doesn't guarantee that the work is productive. It just means that whatever happens, people don't fight each other, they don't kill each other, they don't engage in behavior that depends on the financial success of the company. And then if the financial success is bleak, if the financial forecast is bleak, they start indulging or tolerating behavior that makes co-workers resent each other. Especially senior management tolerating or displaying behavior, even if it's just body language, that would incentivize people to sort of lower the standard and start indulging in behavior that incentivizes, either neglect or incompetence or naming, shaming, or just making people feel miserable at work, because they will want to avoid coming to work. And then that's how the coping mechanism starts kicking in. It's like, I don't want to fight, I don't want to argue, it's pointless, I just want to do my job and then go home and play video games. Or
I want to do my job in confidence. I want to
Yeah.
do my job in confidence. What
Exactly.
means that? So it is a little bit like, for example, let's take the part of the deployment. It's oftentimes when we talk
Hmm.
about continuous delivery, trunk-based development, stuff like that, and then other companies. I had that today actually, saying how can that actually be? You can't just let a junior developer deploy something. It is basically not in a mindset of a people that this is
I
actually
laugh.
possible.
I
You
shouldn't
know,
laugh, but
it is
I
it
get
is like
this a
that,
lot as well. Yeah.
and you know why? So why is that? Because junior developers oftentimes afraid doing that because
Yeah.
they are afraid of the consequences, and it is not about hey we could break something. It's about the reaction of the team or the
Hmm.
management on a fail like this. So it is a little bit if a senior is doing
They
that
preempt being
in that
blamed
culture.
for failing.
Exactly. A
Yeah.
senior is allowed to do that because if the senior can't fix it, no one can. But if the
Because they
junior
will blame
couldn't,
themselves anyway, so they might as
yeah.
well do it. But the junior will not blame themselves because they know they
But you need to think shortly
if you're not
about the benefit.
confident, right? So the point is about so what's the I want to be very precise with my wording here. Um, so the key the key quality, personal quality that separates a junior from somebody who might not feel this way in the company. Let's say it's a senior, or it might just be any other peer who's been there for a long time, who's not being labeled as a junior, a non-junior, let's say. The key quality is accountability, right? So if the junior feels incompetent, they will not hold themselves accountable, right? So they are sharing accountability with somebody else. They're expecting for somebody to hold their hand, and which means that I think you're accountable for my decisions. So when I make a mistake, I feel like you will hold me accountable for you holding yourself accountable. Or rather, you will blame me for performing the action for which you now hold yourself accountable. So the emotional loop is actually benevolent. You don't want the person, you have empathy with the person whom you've empowered to be accountable for your decisions, for your bad decisions, and you don't want them to feel negative emotion, right? So but that can quickly backfire, is that if you're stuck in that situation, you will constantly preempt, you'll be anxious about the negative emotion that you think you might be inflicting on that other person, and if that's the only thing you see, you start
Yeah,
projecting all of that negativity onto yourself. It's like, oh,
yeah,
my boss will be bad because I did X and Y and Z, even if you didn't talk to them, right? So when you make a mistake, you don't think, oh, I need to fix this because our customers. No. Oh, I need to fix this because my boss will be mad.
yeah.
Right. So
This is the
that
opposite of ownership. This
that is the
is
opposite of ownership. Exactly. Right.
yeah,
So you're not
you don't take an
accountable.
accountability for that. Instead, you hand it off to someone else who takes accountability for that, which
Mhm.
means that, and this is oftentimes a little bit
And
other than
and
you have described. Actually, it is when I saw is
mhm.
actually people are getting less mature in what they do because they think I can push that now. And I don't need to take too much back because there is someone anyway looking on that,
Mhm.
and this person is responsible, not me. And I like the aspect of a
Mhm.
junior is pushing and knowing that this will go to production on
Yes.
some point, and there is a
Yeah.
big chance that no one is looking to it. And this person
Mhm.
who is pushing right now, pulling, basically push the button, push enter. If you do it in CLI, but if you are the person doing that, you are responsible for the consequence, and this makes you responsible
Mhm.
and not really accountable necessarily, but responsible. And
Mhm.
if you are a responsible person, this is one of the parts of a good culture. So responsibility, ownership, and maturity. This is the
Mhm.
second pillar of culture for me. So the first one is
Mhm.
mindset, skill, and culture itself, then culture, and then the third one for me is being an engineer instead of a mastercraft. And
Mhm.
those three, this is one of the part of my presentation as well. And I really believing in those things. This is basically my takeaway from all the fellowships and let's say 15 years of failing as a CTO. That's actually this is where I learned most, I think, of my because all mistakes I'm talking about, I experienced that firsthand as the
I mean,
main
sadly, a
responsible
lot of
person.
engineers don't stay long enough at a company to actually, connect the dots backwards and to check, which of their decisions were good ones and which of their decisions were bad ones. Especially if you're constantly stuck in a negative mindset of, yeah, things are bad, things are never optimal. So let's just, which is very pragmatic, right? So you do that as a coping mechanism to not drive yourself crazy. But it's really important to try to find a shorter feedback loop. Sebastian mentions that changed everything for me. Could you mention what you're referring to? Is it accountability? Is it the ownership about deploying as junior? I think that's when the comment landed. Right. So what's also very important is to separate out. Right. So when I said in the retrospective or let's say the truth seeking meetings, you want things to be personal but blameless. What I meant is that you want everybody to feel accordingly to how things actually acted out, right? So I don't want it, if we're talking about a team, I don't want to have this discussion of, yes, this happened and that happened and this happened and that happened. But it would help if people would communicate. It's like, I did this and then I observed this happened, right? So communicate the truth from your perspective, make it personal, right? So I can't say that X happened because I didn't see X happen. I saw X being reported by this person, right? I saw that this was mentioned. I saw the Slack notification. I didn't actually see it go live. I saw the the chatbot in Slack tell me that something was attempted to be pushed, right? So it's really useful to make it personal, because you're not creating like a legal document of record where things have to be sort of distilled and sort of dehumanized into roles and responsibilities. But in our retrospective, it's really important to say, "Oh, I didn't experience this. I didn't see this, or I did see this, or I thought at the time that this was perhaps not the best idea, but it didn't have anything to prove it. So we just went with whatever we knew was best, right?" Those are great phrases to use in retrospectives, in meetings, especially about incident response, about growth. If you're doing a one-on-one review or a quarterly review, or if you're doing one-on-ones with your manager or with peers or with your skip level, those are great phrases to be sort of encouraging, to actually say what's going on in your sphere of influence. One of our most common topics in one-on-one coaching with the tech leads is deal with what's in front of you, right? So try not to solve this predictive game of, I'm doing waterfall in my head and then I'm translating that to some kind of agile framework on my calendar. That's silly, because that's perfectionism, that's over analysis. Just deal with what's in front of you. If you said you'll do X, if last week you said you'll do X, and now a week has passed and you haven't done X, let's stop analyzing why that's the case. Let's just look backwards. You said X would be done. Okay, it's not done. That's okay. But why is it not done? Why did we feel confident last week to make this promise? Right? Because I don't want us to continue with exactly the same communication. We have data. I want us to act on the data. Let's make a decision. Let's learn something. Okay, so I made this promise thinking that this other thing was true. I thought we would be finished by now because I was overconfident, or I was ignoring the underlying issues.
Yeah.
And then I promised that this would have to be done, because now I'm really upset because we're over budget and we're past the deadline, right? So we're behind deadline, over budget. And I'm just going to speak what I want to happen, not what's actually in front of me. And then once challenged, it gets the gears rolling of, okay, well, what is actually the truth? Well, the truth is that in the moment, there was this issue that required my immediate attention because it was urgent. And we didn't prevent that from happening in the future. So this week it can happen as well. So this week I won't promise that this will be done, but I do need to do something about this urgent incident continuing to reoccur in a systematic way, right? So it might be usually it is what happens when the pipeline fails. Do you trust your tests? Is somebody stuck waiting for reviews, doing some weird octopus merge? Are your requirements of high enough quality? Does feedback from the customers take too long, right? So these are usually the main culprits. Yes, I did my work, but I didn't get feedback, so I'm continuing with what's in my backlog. That is mistake number one, right? So if there's no feedback, we need to fix the feedback cycle, right? Remember what we said. In an adaptive system, it's really important that the feedback loops are short. If the feedback loops are long, well, now I have a month's worth of decisions. But first of all, I have to remember all of them. I have to remember what they were, why I made them, what the context was in my mind, and then try to reproduce, okay, which one of those were good, which one of those were bad. And the longer you wait, the more complex that becomes. And not just one person. Now imagine you're doing this on a large organizational scale. This becomes immediately unmanageable. And then what people tend to go towards is, well, what does the predictive document say that we created 2 months ago about how the roadmap and how the Gantt chart aligns, right? Because that's what people have for data.
Oops. I
It's all
just
good.
wanted.
The
Okay.
presentation, yeah.
Yeah. Before we start.
Oh,
to
the
waffle too
background
much.
matches, beautiful.
Yeah. Strange, right? Is it? Could have been me who wrote that. I quickly want to go through the middle
Go for it.
slides of my presentation. So it is actually the presentation of let's say I couldn't forward it. Damn it. Wrong. So it was basically about the culture first approach. So this is the concept. So culture first is the concept, and the claim is why culture beats technology. So this is the question we wanted to solve this day. And now I go actually to through the intro over to the part one, and this is what we have talked in the very beginning today, which was the dominant culture. And the dominant culture is AKA leading to a toxic culture. And a dominant team culture is what I've just described. So this is the very first thing you should take a look for, because if you can't get this away, you can't change, because there are the strong people. And so let's get to the second part. And this is what we've just discussed, I think, in the middle part today, which I define. So this is not something you find in books, I think. Actually, this is the summation of the majority of my articles and newsletters and LinkedIn posts I've made. And this is what I came to basically my conclusion of the last 3 years of working with other people and my reflecting my own past. So those are the three pillars. It's the mindsets, the skills, and the culture. It is the ownership, maturity, and actually responsibility is missing here. And it is the being a software engineer instead of a mastercraft. Those three things are quite important. So, but regarding in time, I want to go to the next ones as well, because I think we haven't tackled those too much. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. We will still go into a question, a Q&A.
We do have a question by Francois, but we can tackle that after the presentation because it does connect.
Okay, I will quickly go through, and then you can ask about the specific part. Just remember, please, the headline or the part number. So people's first. So why culture actually surpasses technology? And there was a good point. So it is basically about the core values. So you need to make sure that there are values in your team, and those values, they can come from bottom up, they can come from top down, but they need to be there. On some point, they need to be. The larger you are, the more top down it's necessary to actually infuse them, because the more random it gets at the bottom line, right? And this is something you need to take care of. So innovation. So what is actually a good symptom of a good culture? It's innovation. Innovation is the result of change. So if you change a lot, you get a lot of feedback, and you can get innovation. This is which brings you forward. If you don't have innovation, right, then it is a sign that you have a bad culture, at least a mediocre stagnation of.
A great,
what?
A great example that designers hate is, innovation is when you give me designs and I start implementing it, and I do it differently.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's innovation, right? Because that is, again, that is an adaptive flow, right? I showed it to the customer, I ran it with the team decided that there's a simpler, better way. And we have to be open to that, right? Because it's very tempting to say, I made the perfect plan. I'm an ivory tower architect, ivory tower designer. I sort of make this predictive plan, laying out how it should be in a perfect world, and then expect you to follow it pixel perfect. But again, it doesn't have to be graphical design. It can be architecture, it can be business, it can be order of features, it can be a roadmap, it can be a Gantt chart, it can be a work plan, it can be who are we hiring, who are we not hiring. Innovation is, I had a plan and I changed my mind last minute. That's innovation.
Yeah.
Because the truth presented itself to you just in time, right? So JIT, like just in time. As you needed it, that's when you had the most knowledge and you made a better decision than what you had on hand, what you had written down 2 weeks ago, and you acted on it. That is what
Improvement.
innovation is. And being able to do that courageously, fearlessly, is what a sign of a good culture is. Because a lot of
Yeah.
people stigmatize this. A lot of people who have been brought up with predictive planning models, they say, oh, people changing their minds last minute and don't follow the plan, that's silly, that's unprofessional. And that is bad culture. If your culture requires innovation, you need to follow adaptive processes, which is the whole point of agile, right? It is an adaptive process in contrast to predictive processes.
Exactly. So if you work one week on some topic, and you finally every day you add something to it and becomes better and better, and in the end some person said, but it doesn't look like what I've provided you 1 week ago, then they actually have a problem in your company, right? But let's go ahead. So resilience through cultural diversity, right? So what does that mean? Cultural diversity is to have multiple opinions and sometimes no strong opinions. So opinions you don't really see. People who are very silent, introverted people, can be as well as very extroverted people who show their opinions very strong. And we've talked about that. But in reality, having multiple opinions in place will lead you, or let's say an opinion is a driver, which means if you have an opinion, and you can, let's say, you can say, this is my opinion, I want to show you my opinion, you drive something forward. If you have multiple of those, the chance will be higher to get the better result than you're just a single person, which is the reason why cultural diversity is actually a form of resilience, which means that the whole process is more resilient and it is more likely to have innovation because it's a strong thing which doesn't suddenly break down. Because there's only one person doing something, this person is then gone, and suddenly nothing is working anymore, which is the reason why we should have diversity. And the foundation of continuous change, which means that actually foundation of continuity, we need to have something like that. And if you add the things we have just talked about together, you get to this foundation you need to have. So you need to have a foundation in your company where it's basically default, where it's normal, where it's standard, where it's common to innovate, to change, and to continuously do something different. And yes, it is actually describing what agile is about, but most people don't really understand when they hear agile because Scrum is coming to mind. And it's not about Scrum. Scrum is a methodology, and agile in this case is actually a way of working, a way of thinking, a mindset-driven thing.
But it's funny because
mindset. It's a mindset.
Scrum predates the Agile Manifesto. We have to be very specific about that, right? So there are Scrum ideas and frameworks that are not Agile, especially the whole theater about, Scrum is coming from the Industrial Revolution. It is not coming from the technology age, right? So there are ideas in Scrum which are dated, and the Agile Manifesto has removed them from the manifesto, right? So Scrum is not an implementation of Agile. Agile was extracting everything that made sense from Scrum, right? So that means that there are things in Scrum that don't make sense, and the history is worth is worth checking. And also, if you haven't read the Scrum handbook,
Yeah, Scrum is more
it's
aligned to
17.
waterfall than actually agile, because you're thinking in
There's a lot
sprints,
of
and sprints are a
ceremony.
realization of
Yeah.
the let's say broken down
Yes, but
waterfall process,
but
but
it's
not the
bringing
agile
down
process, which is
the
coming from up.
context for Scrum is to bring down 1 year, 2 year, 3 year plans down to 2 weeks. Because back in those days, that made sense and that was very practical. But we can do better than that, right? Today, that's a low standard. We need to get down 2-week feedback loops to 10 minutes, and we have a question on that. And but you do cover
Yeah,
it in your
let's go over the question, then I go to the next slide.
Okay, so Francois asked if you join a dev team that is content with mediocre code and not dealing with tech debt, are there any good ways to encourage them to take ownership and improve the project? Often it feels like comments on PRs are just an annoyance.
Yeah,
What's
for
your
example,
opinion?
remove pull requests and and code reviews, and start to talk together. So
Yeah.
what I see very often is, first of all, pull requests are, especially if you are mediocre anyway, the people are tending to not doing them any good. So I would remove them and instead work for a while chunk-based development, in chunk-based development style, and start to
Best approach.
communicate very, very, very close together, which means that
Yeah.
sit down together, talk about how you want to solve something, maybe introduce TDD in order to think or specify something before you actually want to implement it, and work together on it. So have multiple opinions at the same time, working for the best solution for a problem. And this is something you cannot do in a pull request, because there is so much loss in that communication flow that is actually, people sometimes don't have time. They just push through, especially longer pull requests. No one is reading them. Long pull requests are always okay. Looks great, let's do it, right? And it's the smaller they become, the more people like to argue, and it's a little bit like this resistance stuff. I saw people saying, I don't like this, and they reject, and there is no reason for, because then they have the feeling they have contributed something great to the system. No, stop that BS. Go and talk with the people, face the people, show them how you think about things. The other person shows you how you think about things, and then you get to the solution, which is the best for the higher good. This is what you should do. Yes, Sebastian, that's great.
I have a controversial opinion on this, but we like controversial opinions around here. So, first of all, pull requests are meant as a way of collaboration for asynchronous, low-trust environments. In, for example, open source communities where I have admin rights and you don't. So I have to confirm
But this is
that
not
it
the
can go in.
example. This is not
I
the
know,
example.
I know. But if he's working in a company, then the pull requests are already not helpful in that context.
Yeah.
Because both of you have admin access. Both of you should be able to confidently commit and push to production. That's one aspect. That's the PR aspect, right? So the PR aspect, completely unnecessary. If the person cannot be trusted, they should not be working in the company. This gatekeeping does not help them in any way. The second aspect is PRs and code reviews. Let's look at the code review part of the comment, which says, so he says, often it feels like comments on PRs are just an annoyance. Exactly, because PRs, code reviews, are a form of collaboration, and it's possible you have never trained how to collaborate with your coworkers. You always work alone, and then the PRs and the code reviews are the only form of collaboration. It's as if I'm playing a soccer match and we're a professional sports team, and I never talk. The only time I talk to my teammates is when we're actually playing on a really important game on the field. We don't practice together. We don't go to lunches together. We don't travel in the same bus. There is zero collaboration. The only time I make contact with my team is on that really critical match. So if you don't have evidence of being able to collaborate with your team, start with that. Schedule. I often say to my coaching clients, put a meeting slot on the calendar, 45 minutes, make it recurring, and make it about, in that time slot, I am open for pair programming. So anybody can come in and join you, and even schedule with people. Hey, you can have my Tuesday slot.
That's
You
great.
have 1 or 2 slots of those in a week, and practice how to give feedback. Practice how to receive feedback from your teammates, because it is possible that the way you read them, you interpret them, or the way you write them, that it is annoying, because you write them in a way that is annoying because you've never checked. Okay, well, how should I? If I gave you feedback on this, how would you best want me to write it so that you don't get defensive? Because it's possible that I'm judgmental in my tone when you read it, but if I say it out
Yeah,
loud, it
human
does.
communication is basically with multiple senses and not just
Yes.
reading something and try to interpret
Body
it.
language, intention.
Exactly,
Even if
this
it's
is missing.
remote,
Yeah.
you can go to Slack, you can go on a huddle, on a cuddle.
On a cuddle.
Adrian likes to, on a cuddle. You can go on a remote cuddle, and you can have the cameras on the screen and 2 people. Slack, I think, is one of the rare ones where it doesn't crash your system if 2 people share screens at the same time, and you can just switch between each of them. So both of you can share screens. I can open your screen, you can open my screen, and I have
You can
my
do that
screen
in code
open
with
well.
me as well.
You can do it in code with me as well if you're on the IntelliJ, and I think VS Code has something similar, but it doesn't have the same fidelity. So practice collaborating together, right? So that's the teamwork aspect. Don't do TDD together. Don't write code together in a way that's super complicated, because you might annoy each other, because you have evidence of being able to annoy each other. Just practice pairing for the sake of pairing, so that you learn how to collaborate with your peers, how to collaborate with your manager, how to collaborate with a designer, with somebody who's not an engineer. Check out one of our older videos. We Adrian and I pair program a lot live on stream. We pair programmed a lot with some of our guests. We pair programmed a lot with Jonathan Hall regularly on our channel and his channel. Check out what it feels like to actually have a conversation with them. What it's like to actually be part of a cyber dojo and actually code together in a way where 2 people might be using 2 keyboards at the same time and writing code in parallel, but also having a conversation and challenging each other's ideas.
Exactly. So most people I met so far in, let's say, developers or engineers have never done proper pair programming. Sometimes they had other colleagues looking at their code, commenting and going away, but not a real session where you had the idea of, hey, we are working together on the same problem actively. And this is something, we have some feedback. I really like the suggestions, and the football match analysis is spot on. Thank you. That's good.
Sorry,
okay, let's go again because time and we have a hard stop. Okay.
I have
one more.
Just one more. There was one
more.
All
right, I get the waffle thing.
Get the waffle thing. Get the waffle. He mentions if you join a dev team, so there's a hint of judgment. This dev team is content with mediocre code and not dealing with tech debt. Code reviews are not a good solution to deal with tech debt, right? Because I had this exact same situation. I keep having this situation with every one of my coaching clients, because this is real. Everybody I work with has this problem, because usually we got told that pull requests are a good thing. But the problem is, now here's the tricky part. Okay. If you don't want bugs, then inspecting the bugs away is not the best solution, right? So you create code, the code has bugs, and then you commit that, and then you inspect it and say, oh, code is shit because it has bugs, right? So this person is now looking at bugged code, and they're trying to reverse engineer what the correct code looks like, looking at it from the bugged side. And that is looking for problems, right? Here's a different analogy. Imagine my steak is always overcooked. You cook the steak, and I tell you, you figured it out. And then you bring me the steak, and you say, I review your steak, and you say, overcooked. Overcooked. And you keep bringing it back. Overcooked. I'm not going to eat this. Overcooked. Sorry. Do it again. Right? The problem is, they're always coming at the problem from the overcooked state. They can never undercook it because they don't know what they're doing wrong. By the time they're ready for the PR, it's already overcooked. The code has been cooking too long. right? So the point is, you need to get to the creation part. If you have a wall and you're a carpenter and you're making wooden walls, and if the walls have holes, well, don't create the walls with holes and try to then inspect the holes away. What you need to teach is how to make the wall without having visible holes,
Yeah.
right? So
Prevent.
you
You
need
need to prevent from that from
exactly.
happen.
So
And this is
you
the
need to
idea of
give
code reviews and in
and
the
pairing.
original
You
sense.
need to
It is to long-term quality instead of fixing bugs.
yes. You need
Yeah.
to show the engineer what the correct code would actually look like as they're creating it. So instead of creating the bad code that won't pass review, show them what the code that will pass review looks like before they create this one. Because they will immediately get personal, biased, attached to what they created, and whatever you show them will not match the reality. They will want to get from here to the ideal state. But if they're in a messy state, it's very difficult to incrementally come to the non-messy state. It's much easier to show them this is how it's done correctly. You've done this right. This was very good. Keep doing this, and this you can do differently. Here's what it would look like if we had followed all these rules from the beginning. And that's what you can do in pairing sessions. That's impossible to do in code reviews because it's condescending, right? Oh, the PR is wrong. Here's what you should have done instead. And then I go re-implementing your entire PR. Like you're just gonna be defensive. There's nothing. You're just gonna be defensive and annoyed and offended, right? So there's nothing positive that can come out of that because the feedback came too late, right? Because if people are consistently building bad software, then they don't know what good software looks like. So you need to teach them. Now it's possible you also don't know what it looks like.
You need to teach
Which means
yourself.
you need
It's an ongoing process.
Yes, which
So
means
if I take a
you would
look at
both
my
benefit
at the blame
from-
list
yeah.
of my own code,
Yeah.
I realize that I sometimes when I see my own code, I feel like a junior in that moment because this code is just 2 months old, and I'm not sure what I thought in that moment. But this is a part of becoming better and refactoring something. So it is better to do something which is working and good and constantly refactor. So I think it was Dave Farley saying that. Was it Dave Farley? I don't know. Who said that basically elite performers refactor more than 60% of their code in 1 year.
Yeah.
I think it was like that.
It's from the
Please
Linear
correct me
B
if it-
report. It's from the Linear
Yeah,
B report.
right. But now
But it
we
was
are
Dave Farley.
waffling.
Waffling. Thank you. Let's go.
Okay, so yeah, here we are. So part no 3-1. Okay. People first, yeah, fine, but why isn't tech more important than human interaction then? So the core of every team is the collective of its people, conflicts, and elitist structures block the process. So which means that every form of elitism and conflicts are something which keeps you back from progress, right? But the collective of its people, right, is the core of that, which means you need to make sure that the core of your team is not in a conflicted state. That's not good. And it's not an elitist structure, which are gatekeepers, which means there is one person you need to ask for everything, for every term of permission. And we had just had that example with the pull request and code review when someone
that
needs
is-
to ask for permission.
And that is also a problem with meritocracies and financial incentives, right? So it shouldn't be the smartest people who get rewarded. It should be the best ideas. And there is no correlation between intelligence and best ideas, right? Actually, diverse teams have a higher sort of equality coefficient than intellect. But because they are diverse, they can come up with much better ideas, right? So it's usually the best performing teams that win, not the best performing person.
Right. And this is about culture, right? So it is
Yeah.
basically the common team effort, which is then contributing to the higher goal, to the mission. Right. So, and technology is based on progress. So technology, every form of technology, every form of innovation there is based on progress. Technology cannot stand still, it will break. Every software project, this is one of the big problems with agency-based software application and products. They are great in the beginning, and they're a great tendency to become very quickly legacy systems, because no one is actually improving them over time, because no one is
Agencies,
caring money-wise
not
about that anymore.
agencies are not sustainable long term. The incentive
Exactly.
structures are backwards. Yeah, they only work for
Exactly.
short time horizons.
Exactly. You can't sustain that. And this is the reason why oftentimes in smaller agencies or agencies in general, you have a more toxic culture, because it's always, bound to the stress limitations or circumstances. And
Short
in a
projects,
product based,
tight
you have more
deadlines,
this.
high
Yeah,
margin. Yeah.
and the product based one is that one with the one common mission, which I'm talking about. And there you have this mission where everyone can contribute to. Okay, and the positive collective strives for innovation, which means that if you have this collective of people where you have good mindsets, where you're developing skills, where you come out with the best results by having good and positive argumentations about that, then you have a positive collective, and you actually try to be innovative. So, which means that on some point you are so affirmed by that, you go together into a room and you think, we want to go into that room to find the best solution and come out with that. This is what we think of ourselves. This is then when you have reached the point where you are on a journey and you have a good constant pace which is sustainable. This is what you want to get. Okay, then we have the mentorship model. Culture through leading, learning, and making mistakes. So the senior developer, we have talked about that very often. The senior developer is not the mastercraft, it's not the elitist person, it's not the great sailor, it's not the hero of the team. It must be the cornerstone. And the cornerstone is, in that moment, the person who is actually making sure that this culture, this team set culture, mindset, and the team's the cultural aspects can actually happen. Those are the people who nurture others, who help others to grow, which
They're
this is
the
the reason.
radiator. They are the
Exactly.
knowledge radiator, the culture
This is what I
radiator.
often refer to the average developer. A senior makes sure that the entire process is doable by an average developer, which is then engineering again to make complex things simple to use.
Simple.
And the senior engineers are the only ones who can do that because of the experience. So wasting their time to actually make the work and no one else can keep up with that is stupid. You shouldn't do that. And the transition from the boss to the mentor is to not have a strict imperative top-down architecture, the typical industrial age thing, where you have one person who is actually telling you what to do, to the point where you have a person who is that experienced and actually helps you to do it yourself. This is the actual leadership model you should have, is the mentorship model.
I have a great analogy on this, because I had the good fortune of working with somebody for whom I was their boss while they were a junior, and then I became their mentor. And I could tell from, like, emotionally, from my perspective, I knew exactly what the differentiating factor was. And it's this feeling of, if I'm his boss, then I'm accountable for what he's doing, so he doesn't have ownership. So if he's misbehaving, right? So if this junior, they push back on me, but we're clumsy, we haven't worked together for very long, so they might prefer their own way of working, and I'm not doing a very good job sort of sharing knowledge. It is possible that they might split from my guidance, and then the boss kicks in in such a way that says, well, now we've diverged, we're not on track anymore, so in order for us to meet the goals, I will now stop mentoring you so that we can get back on track, and then we will continue. That is boss mode. Mentor mode, which is a shift that I then had after we both earned each other's respect and trust. Mentor mode was, I will let you do this decision, even if it's the wrong one. I will help you deal with whatever consequences are for this decision. You want to do it your own way? Sure. How can I help?
This leads to loyalty.
Exactly.
And loyalty means that you have a long-term relationship and people can add. So it is I tell it you now as an employer. If you have on your CV basically a change of your workplace every half a year, and you try to basically sell it to me as an advantage, I'll tell you I don't like that. Why? Because you never saw your own consequences of your own decisions you made. This is what I dislike. So the best thing you can have is try to be as long as possible at one place and improve and explain to me what was 5 years ago, what was 3 years ago, and what is today, and how you see the change. This is so much more valuable. Sorry to say that right now. So all the people who say you need to switch, is this only because of salaries? This is not because of your skills. I never saw a person in that case who really knew what you talked, Dennis. You talked about that, the seeking for truth. You can't, because you don't know what the truth is, right? So you never experience it firsthand. So advice for me: if you don't need to leave a company, instead of move away, try to stay at the company and try to make sure you learn the most you can there, because this is what makes you a real senior someday.
Because
a person who can mentor others.
Because the alternative is, my job sucks, and if I skip jobs, I get paid more. You're incentivized financially not to learn. And then you job hop and you get a higher salary. And then 6 months, 9 months from now, the exact same situation will happen again. And you don't actually feel fulfilled and happy with the higher salary. You just shifted the bar, inflated your lifestyle, and now you have exactly the same problems with just at higher scale, at higher financial pressure. And 2 years from now, 3 years from now, you'll have a feeling that you have stagnated. The salary went up, but skill-wise, knowledge-wise, you've stagnated in your career. And then when it's actually time to be challenged with a higher level position, you will feel like you've missed out on 4 or 5 years of potential progress that you said no to, because you rather job hopped and avoided the problem.
Then after 6 years, someone grants you a senior position. From that moment, you call yourself a senior. But, and this is the point, if you cannot be a mentor, and if you cannot be a cornerstone, and I just tell you that now in a very, let's say, open way, you are not a senior in that position. You are just senior on paper. Senior are the persons who help others, who are the cornerstones. Otherwise, this position doesn't make any sense. In larger companies, it's a little different, because they treat seniors as a specific grade with specific responsibilities. But the vast majority of the audience and people on LinkedIn are not in those last companies.
That's an HR-driven cost center. That's not an engineering department. Like, that's just
So always think about that. The summation of experiences from your own doing is actually what makes you. And if you make a decision and you move away, you don't know what the result was. So if you don't need to pay back or pay down your technical debt, then it's actually not a technical debt you do. It's just damage you cause.
Plus, you might be comparing yourself to US salaries or FOMO about how somebody else is making, 140 per year and you're making 110, and if you job hop now, in 2 years you could do 190k, blah blah blah. But most of those numbers are inflated by private equity stock, by public shares, and it's possible that they have vesting periods or cliff periods that you can't even exercise them within the next 4 to 5 years, or the shares are constantly getting diluted or bought back, right? So it's possible that on paper you're getting paid a high salary, but you don't get that number on your first year. You don't get that number on your last year. If you're working at a FAANG company, they're trying to promote or fire you in the first 2 years, right? So you also need to grow, and your salary is not going up substantially.
We have 9 minutes left.
If you actually do end up job hopping, you've actually gained less salary than how much you thought you were getting. And then you get to not learn anything from that lesson.
But the actual value is lower. And the problem now from let's quickly, from the standpoint of the the company owner, the CTO, the engineering manager, loyalty is a problem then, because if people constantly switch companies, you will have problems with innovation as well, because no one
Yeah.
is really following up on those things. But let's go to the next one. Blameless culture is, I think, self-explaining now. So since we really have some minutes left, part 5, the gap between business and development, one of my favorite topics, and it hurts so much. Every day I see that still. It is so common, and it's one of the, let's say, okay, the dominant culture is a heavy problem, but this is a problem. This is artificially made. It is, yeah, if we
It's like
foolishly think in
a
departments, right?
divorced couple that still lives together, right? It's like this.
It is,
The engineering department is divorced from product
if
leadership, and it's
if
just
you start to take, if someone calls your team a department, there is already a mistake.
Yeah.
It is no department. There is no isolation. You, as a software development team, engineering team, you create the outcome. You are the central aspect of the team, even though the people outside may not know you, but still in the business context, you are a crucial part. You are not something, and this is the reason why so many departments are basically outsourced to somewhere else, which is a bad thing for the company to do, because you need to get rid of that in order to really get a good product where the software engineers are part of the business. And this is where you need to get to in order to have a good culture, because there are so many bad consequences because of that. We don't have time to discuss them, but it is inclusive team dynamics, promote innovation and productivity. If the software developers exactly know why clients have problems, customers or users have problems, because they sit next to them, they were phoning with them. This is where you get real feedback, honest and genuine feedback, and not about, hey, there's a ticket, there is something wrong with the page. I need to fix that. I don't want to. I want to go home. No, I want to fix that because I know it hurts other people. I want to contribute to the product. This is the mission again, right? This is an inclusive thing, not a department. You can think in teams, teams are doing things which they can do very well, but teams are actually part of a bigger team, which is then doing that exactly. So read that. We are a team, not departments. Positive developer experience. This leads to actually DevX, right? So developer experience is not with a ticket board. When you responsibly answer the ticket board, you feel like a worker node and not a human being. You feel like those are the people who are actually afraid of losing their jobs because of AI. This is simply put down to the point. You don't need to be afraid of AI anyway if you are a real software developer. So a software developer is not a programmer. A software developer can be someone who's not programming. A software developer is a person who develops software. The same as the game developer is not necessarily a person who programs. It is a person who is from alpha to omega in the entire journey, in the entire life cycle.
Specifically, a game developer might be developing a specific game rather than coding a game engine, right? So I think that actually has a very good connotation. Same with the web frameworks, right? When you're a React developer, you're not actually developing React. What you're actually building is you're building a UI for a business. You happen to be using React, but you're not building the framework for which it is building, right? So
okay,
it's a very weird distinction that a lot of back-end, front-end specialists take.
And DevOps is not just IT. This is a translation problem. This is actually a translated version automatically by Canva. So I think I have meant something different in the last line, but it is still okay. So
I have it open. Hang on. I have it open. So you mentioned, this is slide 9. Okay.
I don't know.
Slide 9.
Yeah,
it says DevOps is nicht nur IT. So DevOps is not only IT.
Okay, it is actually translated correctly.
It is translated correctly.
So it actually means that DevOps is not just the person who's doing IT operations. DevOps is the idea of the culture. I just wanted to mention that because DevOps is in fact a culture, and it describes, if you take DevBizOps, then we actually are here on the side as well, again, right? So you remove the gap by, being an inclusive team with a business. So the business is working together with you. The business and the clients are working together with you. The operations people are working together with you. If there is a problem, it is ours. It is not yours. It is ours. And this is the point about it. So let's quickly go. So culture only works together, and it takes time. So if you ever were on a hike, on a through hike, you know it takes time. And you need to be disciplined and you need to be motivated to do those things. Otherwise, you have 1 million reasons to stop on some point and go home and watch Netflix or play computer games or do something or eat chips or something like that, right? But if you want to follow through, you need to have the mindset as a team to go all the way out, right? This is what you need to learn. And culture is a journey. That good thing on that journey, you will end up with maturity, ownership, responsibility, and engineering culture. This is something you should aim for. And you will never get those things if you are not going on a constant journey. You won't. This is the point why the fellowships actually exist. So the entire idea why I'm doing content is that. Because you cannot achieve that. Everyone who's just staying still is not mature, is not responsible at all. They hide themselves in isolation, in branches, blameless culture, finger pointing, being on sick leave for way too long, all those kind of things. And, they're complaining about specific technologies and try to hide in discussions where they shouldn't hide. For example, which is the best thing for this? And I believe that. No, you are wrong. Something like this is not engineering. Engineering is about how can we get the mission into realization? This is engineering.
A sprint planning session is not culture. Like
it is not. and exactly. You need to get to that point via a journey. This is what you should do. So start your journey.
Is that you in the picture in the back?
No, actually, I haven't found my own images for that.
Because I know you have some, right?
I have a lot. I actually need to find them and show them next time. This is a good point, actually. So
anyway, Adrian's Linktree link down below. If you would like to invite Adrian for a fellowship or hire Adrian for a fellowship or to a meetup, that's his link. And I encourage you to reach out to him because I've been learning a lot from Adrian. I've seen Adrian work. We meet every week, and the discussions he has are of very high quality, and it's very rare. It's very rare that you would find somebody that you can talk to about anything cultural, technology, or business related, and actually get a lot of tangible feedback, a lot of tangible insights, in an hour. That can have radical changes to your business.
Yeah.
So check out his stuff. He also writes a blog.
I think I have. No, I don't know. I
think you had it in the German one, but
not in that one. That was made for. I removed the part where you can get a QR code. No, never mind. Okay, so that was it actually for today. We have now the time where I actually need to go. So thank you, everyone. And again, I want to give it back to Dennis. Tomorrow we have Dennis stream, same time, 4:00. About what, Dennis? Tell me, because
we're looking into NoSQL databases.
NoSQL database, okay.
Yeah, we had some licensing changes now with Redis, and something similar happened with MongoDB. And I've been having a lot of DynamoDB discussions with some of my coaching clients. And I think it might be worth sort of interesting talking about NoSQL databases because they are sort of becoming less bleeding edge. People are looking for SQL equivalent everything, Kafka SQL and NoSQL SQL and Elasticsearch with SQL capabilities. So NoSQL databases are sort of seemingly becoming a fad, even though the clustering capabilities are very powerful. People tend to avoid NoSQL databases for some reason lately. And I would like to talk about that.
Yeah, me too. So this is one of those cultural things. So I'm rethinking. So I'm not only a fellowship. This is actually not the major stuff I do. I'm
yet.
I'm doing PaaS actually. Not PaaS, SaaS. And we have made decisions. And we were going with Postgres. We were going with Redis. We were going with let's say message queuing systems in between,
Mhm.
specific services or service oriented architectures. And I want to think about a little bit more about NoSQL databases. This was the reason why I came to you with that idea, and you
Mhm.
made that a topic for Thursday. And this is why I'm so interested in. So if anyone there in the audience is about having specific opinions there, we are happy to have you as a hot join tomorrow. Right?
Yeah.
So you can just join that show and start to tell your opinion about that, because we want to be challenged here. Or actually, I want to be challenged. This
For
is
those
not
of you
my
who are
main
still
topic, and I
here,
want to learn, right?
Stefan, Tony, Sebastian, April, we had Sophia, Francois. If you're interested in sort of talking strategically about the types of databases and database management systems and cloud-based managed databases in the NoSQL space, in the NoSQL family, whatever that means, we'll discuss it tomorrow. You're very welcome to join us.
Interestingly, now the numbers going up of the audience, but I need to go. So I thank you very much.
More
I would
tomorrow. Thank you
more tomorrow.
Thank you for tuning in. More tomorrow. Here's our links. This is Adrian. This is me. As always, you can find them on our LinkedIn pages, on our Substacks, which are Snackable CTO and Crafting Tech Teams from my side. This has been lovely. Adrian, thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you for sharing the meetup experience with us as well. I really appreciate that. And I guess I'll see you all tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being part.
Ciao.
Yeah, it's very, very diverse.
A little bit of music, and I'll close off the stream. I think you have to go. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow then.
Ciao.